Hi, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on positive leadership, developing a winning mindset. So my name is Loïc Lemarois, and I am a marketing manager at Spring. So this webinar is intended to be interactive. We want to hear from you. So please do send in your comments, your questions. So there's a small question tab on your application. So please do use that to send in your comments and your questions, and we'll answer them at the end of the webinar. So today we're joined by Noémie Le Pertel. She's a co-director of the Executive Master in Positive Leadership and Transformation at IE University. And as well, we have Nick Van Dam. He's the Chief Learning Officer at IE University, and as well Professor and Director of the IE Center of Corporate Learning and Innovation. Noémie, Nick, hi, how are you today?
Hi, thank you for having us, Nick.
Yes, very, very glad you could join us today. So I'll let you actually start. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to dive in. A little bit about myself. I've been working as a doctor of East Asian integrative medicine for close to a decade now, a little bit over. And I work at different centers, different healthcare systems like Columbia University Medical Center. Again, I work as an academic director with Nick for the Executive Masters in Positive Leadership in the business school. And then I have two companies. One is Empowered Wellness, Center for Positive Leadership, and these are some of the clients I've worked with. And I do consulting as well as a private practice. And then finally, I do some work at Columbia University as an adjunct professor in human capital management. I'm going to hand it over to Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Noémie, and also thanks everybody for joining this session today. And what I want to ask you to do, and hopefully you are at your desk, maybe in the living room, to grab a piece of paper and a pen, because we will do an exercise a little bit later to make it a little bit interactive and for all of us to reflect a little bit on the topic of today. So that will be wonderful. As mentioned, I am part of IE in Madrid. IE is one of the most international universities globally. We have 85% of our students are international, and that's very exciting. I'm also affiliated with a few other schools as a professor at Nijenrode Business School in the Netherlands, as well as at the University of Pennsylvania, where I'm involved with an executive doctor degree for chief learning officers. One of my my hobbies on the side has been writing, and I've enjoyed writing a lot of books actually over the years. If you see on the slide over here, and for those of you who are interested in leadership, Leadership at Scale is a book that I co-authored with about 20 of my colleagues, partners at McKinsey. And there's also a book on the right side. It's hard to read. It's a book called Authentic Confidence. So that also might be of interest to you. I had a professional career at McKinsey and Deloitte as a partner and chief learning officer and HR executive. And I'm affiliated with McKinsey as an external senior advisor. And I think the most interesting thing I would like to share is I have founded an organization called E-Learning for Kids. This is a NGO, a non-profit organization, and we provide digital learning for children between 5 and 12, and we make the content available on the internet, and this is available for free for kids from all over the world. So if you are in touch with a school that can benefit from it, if you have children yourself in that age category, please check out the website and make yourself familiar with the content. I'd like to go to the next slide, and this is kind of a question for you to open the question tab on your screen, and just to reflect today, right? So it's I'm in the Netherlands, close to Amsterdam. It's a beautiful sunny day. It's an official holiday here today, and I wonder where you are and what the weather is and how you are feeling. So if you could just use the question tab and just write something how you are feeling today. And also maybe why are you inspired to listen to this webinar? And we are very grateful that you use your time to listen to us today. So just maybe a few words in the question tab from the application. And I will, if you are writing, and great, I see some comments here. Yeah, thank you for using the box. Sunny, South Africa, wonderful. Yeah. Madrid, from Madrid, dialing in. I know Madrid has been a little bit cold the last couple of weeks. We've had more in Madrid, more rain actually. Passion, peaceful. Thank you for all the comments. So you know, I will start framing actually the discussion, the dialogue that we have today with you about positive leadership. I'm trying to move to the next slide. Yeah. Maybe, yeah, here we are. So for context, you know, if we reflect on where we are today and what has happened over the last couple of months, you know, I bet that all of you, including myself, have moments that we reflect on this and say, wow, you know, it seems like we are in the wrong movie, right? So first, of course, if you look at the health crisis globally, with over 5 million people who have confirmed being affected, over 300,000 people who died actually based on this virus. But also we think about, you know, the global lockdown, many restrictions in place in countries where we are, a huge impact. And then, of course, you know, health and economy come together too. If we look at the state of the economy globally, countries have moved into an economic recession. Decline of GDP is anticipated somewhere between 8 and 13%, depending on where you are. If we look at unemployment, according to a recent report from McKinsey, close to 27% of employment is at risk in Europe. That's kind of, you know, an astounding number. And also, if you look at the United States, depending on what kind of metric you use, between 20 and 30% of people are currently employed or will become employed. And then we have the digital age, you know, on the right upper corner here. We are at the beginning of at the early stage of an era where we will see significant change when it comes to work. According to the World Economic Forum, close to 1 billion people need to upskill and reskill themselves by 2030. So significant change. And the last relates to global warming. You know, this will have an impact. If we look ahead, global warming has an impact on many things, right? So the availability and price of food. It has to do with the fresh water will be in short supply in a number of geographies moving forward. But also, you know, diseases will spread faster due to higher temperature. So it's kind of, you know, all these forces are coming together, and that's kind of, you know, we have to deal with this. Now, I also believe that in any kind of time of challenge, there are opportunities. That's one. And secondly, what we have learned from, you know, the economic downturn in 2008, 2009, and prior to that in 2001, you go back in time in the last century, what we have seen in the economy is that typically economies go up and down, and it might be a very deep recession, but eventually we will get out of this again. And also there are some interesting lessons learned, obviously, and things that we can do differently that might help ourselves, people around us, but also the organizations that we are part of. That's just as context to reflect on. Now, you know, if you probably, and I will try to move the slide here again. It's working. Yes, it's working here. So I want to ask you to take your piece of paper and for yourself, you know, reflecting on your personal situation and maybe what I shared as well, and you know, write down some of the concerns that you have, and that can be smaller ones, bigger ones, but you know, reflect on some overall concerns that you have based on, you know, where you are today and the situation you're in from a work perspective, from a health perspective, etc. So write down a few, you know, 3 concerns. And then if you have done that, you know, on your piece of paper, just draw the circles here, 3 circles. And there are 3 layers: control, influence, and out of your control. And just for yourself to say, what is kind of in your control? You know, if one of the concerns you wrote down, what is in your control? Then also, is there a concern that you know you can influence? And also, there might be things which are outside of your control, right? So just reflect on that as a kind of a practical exercise. But also, if you are in a leadership role yourself, you can also do with people in your organization or friends and family members. And if you have done this, the key point of this exercise is that, and it's based on work from Stephen Covey, is that there are a lot of things that as humans, that there are a lot of things that happen on a day-to-day basis that we think about, that we reflect on, and there are things that we obviously can control. There are things we can influence, and there are things which are outside of our control. Now, it's important from a mental mindset perspective for ourselves to keep these things, you know, very kind of distinguished, because it doesn't make sense to worry a lot about things that are outside of our control, because there's nothing we can do about it. It basically would suck up a lot of our energy if we do so. So therefore, to think about what we can control and what we can influence to some extent, that should be our priorities from a mindset perspective if we think about things that concerns us in our lives. Now I'll turn it over to Noémie.
Thank you, Nick. Can you guys hear me okay? It looks like the audio is working well. So a little bit of context on positive psychology and positive leadership. So our world is oriented and our neurologies are oriented towards problems. What is wrong with people? You know, what problems can we solve? What innovative solutions can we develop? And the majority of research traditionally in the field of psychology and other fields has focused on pathology. So what is wrong? Anxiety, depression. And starting in the 90s, we had a shift here with Martin Seligman, who made a shift in the American Psychological Association to focusing on what is right with us. How can we build happiness, resources, and capacities? And so positive psychological research and practice focus on the good life, how we can build well-being and happiness from a scientific perspective. And if you look at this slide here, you can see some of the key players. So back in the 50s, Abraham Maslow coined the term positive psychology, but it wasn't until many decades later that we saw a surge in the work, the research, the practice. And so we have Ellen Langer, who is often coined as the mother of positive psychology, doing work for over 3 decades at Harvard on mindfulness from a cognitive perspective. Really known in the field of psychology to focus not only on what's wrong with people, but on what's possible and how we can thrive. And Barbara Fredrickson will call a little bit on her work in positive emotions. And then finally, we have Kim Cameron and Jane Dutton, who are leaders in the field of positive organizational scholarship, so positive leadership that we'll be talking about today. Nick?
Yeah. So if you reflect on what Noémie shared on the amazing science of positive psychology, so the question is, what are some of the insights? So what are the things we have learned from positive psychology that have an impact on positive leadership practices and mindsets? And we like to show you some examples here. It's going back. Okay, here we go. So this is kind of an overview of a number of mindsets and leadership practices that can be embodied by leaders in organizations. Think about, as an example, cognitive reframing. Cognitive reframing is a mental technique that will help people to look at a different way at specific problems and concerns. And by reframing actually a certain situation, we can, turn things from, let's say, the negative more to the positive, or from, we cannot do anything about something to there are opportunities to influence this specific situation. But also think about building trust, right? So many of us are working from home and basically, dealing with our colleagues, with people in our teams in a virtual basis. And as we know, it's if we don't have necessarily the live experience, and we can really read people's, non-verbal communication, it might be harder to develop trust. And trust is incredibly important if we think about how we can work together effectively in organizations. So building trust, very key. I started at the beginning, I mentioned a book on authentic confidence that I've co-authored with Jackie Bressie and another colleague from University of Amsterdam. An authentic confidence, building confidence, is also a very powerful practice, and also it's a mindset for people to flourish. And last but not least, overall, it's key to develop, relationships and establish and build on the relationships we have. So there are many kind of, mindsets and practices that we as leaders, as positive leaders, can use in our organizations to build a very distinctive culture where people are flourishing. Now, if you reflect on the practices here, and I want to ask to launch a poll for you to reflect on a question regarding positive leadership mindsets and practices. And you will see the poll on your screen. And it's about, I feel if you reflect on your organization, does your organization really embraces positive leadership practices at this point? How are you thinking about this? Do you strongly agree? Do you agree? Are you neutral? You don't know per se, or are you in disagreement or strongly disagreement? So reflecting on the practices that I shared with you. So where is your organization today? And we'll leave the poll open for about 30 seconds, and then we will show you the results, how you think about this from a global perspective. Okay, here we go. So, I think it's kind of great numbers actually. Most of us would say, yes, we are embracing positive leadership practices in our organization. A number of you are kind of, in the middle, 24, and 8% of you would say, no, it's not necessarily the case in my organization. So what we will do is going to the next slide here. Is to take you through a couple of mindsets and a couple of practices that that are very very powerful for you to use, to embrace in your organization. And the first one, what I like to share with you is insights from Professor Barbara Fredrickson, who has done her whole career a lot of research on emotions. Her research indicates that, of course, all of us, have emotions every day. Things are happening, and sometimes things are unexpected that we experience. And basically, we experience positive and negative emotions. And her research indicates that we need to have, 3 positive emotions to compensate for 1 negative emotion. In order for us to feel well and to, stay optimistic, so we need to have that 3-to-1 ratio. Now, of course, there are differences a little bit by person and also, culture, but overall 3-to-1 is a ratio that is, shared with her. And if you reflect on that, and these emotions can be positive emotions can be just small things, right? So as an example, for myself, I can really enjoy having a fresh cappuccino that will give me a positive emotion. So it really can be small things. Now, using your piece of paper again, and in order to make it a little bit interactive, this webinar, for yourself, if you reflect on activities that will create positive emotions for you. So what are things that can happen every day for you that will give you positive emotions? It might have to do with interaction with your children. It might have to do with having a wonderful conversation with a colleague. So what are some of the things that will create a positive emotions for you? Just give it some thoughts and write it down for yourself. And the second part of the exercise we will not do today, but it's more for you to reflect on. So if you know for yourself, what are activities that give you positive emotions? The question is, how can you make sure that on a day-to-day basis, you incorporate those activities on your calendar, right? So think about all our virtual work that we are doing the whole day. How can we make sure that we have the breaks, that we have moments, that we do something that will create positive emotions for ourselves? It is kind of a very powerful exercise to do. And also, I've seen people around me who have been practicing that, and it has a huge impact on how we are feeling emotionally about, things that are happening to us every day. So, Noémie.
Okay, unmuting myself. Thank you so much, Nick. That's a really powerful, positive intervention. And we know that the power of emotions is really infinite. So you can constantly create capacity on your teams and people in your lives by the way that you show up. And so this leads us into the power of mindfulness. So if you look at these 2 sort of thought bubbles, one is our sort of full mind, the constant nature of our thoughts, our worries, our concerns. And the other one is a sort of clear state of awareness, calm, and a lot of research has emerged in the last couple of decades also on the power of mindfulness, not only physiologically for helping us with our health, but also for our performance, for our learning, for general well-being, as well as positive regeneration. So the aging process. When we talk about long careers in the workforce, having a state of mindfulness and the presence we bring to our work and our teams and our organizations really makes a difference between being a regular leader and also a positive leader. So a note on contemplative practices, not only is mindfulness quite powerful, but also making time for leaders, practitioners, all people to reflect. So this is a major portion of resilience we'll speak about. The ability to regenerate ourselves and to come back and to learn from our experiences is really essential if we want to learn and grow. And this is our passion versus burnout matrix. So if you look at this chart, we have a couple of great images actually Nick came up with, and you'll see that on the x-axis we have the number of working hours, and on the y-axis our level of passion or purpose towards our work. And of course, if both are low, we'll be disengaged, and we all know what that's like. And then if our number of working hours is high, but we have low passion, we might be loyal to our organizations or other roles in our lives, but we won't necessarily gather a lot of vitality or energy from it. And if we have low levels of work or engagement and we have high passion, we might feel a sense of balance, but we can also risk boredom. So it's important for us to all have opportunities to learn and grow, both for our health, but also for longevity of careers. Now, if we have high number of working hours, high levels of passion, which is quite common, say in the nonprofit industry, we can be very purpose-driven, but we can also run ourselves into the ground. So this is where we're at most risk for burnout. And so the sweet spot that we've identified is the space between balanced and as well as driven. And so it's sort of the zone of optimal engagement, so to speak, in terms of our working hours and the amount of energy that we're putting out and our sense of purpose and meaning, and also having the ability and capacity in our lives through reflection and other regenerative practices to regenerate and recover and build resilience. So a little bit on optimism. We know from the research that having an optimistic mindset benefits us physically, mentally, and relationally. But optimism can go different ways. So right now with the pandemic, there's been this phenomenon that we've identified amongst behavioral scientists that's called optimism bias. What happens is people say, well, I'll be okay. My loved ones will be fine. Everything will be fine, so I don't need to take precautions. And this can be harmful as well. And then we have flexible optimism or realistic optimism. And Martin Seligman, who has really made this theory quite famous, speaks a lot about this now. So looking at not only worst case scenarios and best case scenarios, but what's actually realistic and possible. So expanding our set of possible resources and potential outcomes so that we see the full picture and we have more choice. So we know that as human beings, from a neurological system, we have negativity biases. This is why it's so important for us to build more positive emotions for every negative emotions. And also Rick Hansen speaks about building more positive thoughts for every negative thought. And that magic ratio is about 5-to-1. So when you have a negative thought, you need about 5 positive thoughts to sort of compensate. And so looking at the role of positive biases with optimistic biases, as well as negativity bias, it helps to look at situations and notice a time perspective. So when something challenging is going on, realizing that this might be temporary as opposed to pervasive. It's a specific situation, doesn't apply to everything. And recognizing the external forces in our environment that contribute to that as well. And back to you, Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Noémie. So there's also a question about if we reflect on ourselves as leaders at times of turbulence, what is important for people around us, for our colleagues that we are working with. And there's one key theme is it's all about being empathic, open and honest, and empathy starts with really putting yourself in the shoes of the other person. And as Noémie mentioned, it's not about being optimistic or positive for the sake of being optimistic or positive. People have real concerns about their health, about their family, about their job. So it's like have a conversation with people about what are the things that concerns them. it's when we work virtually, it's easy to start with a task, right? So our projects, our initiatives, and just go into that. But it's important to step back and start with the conversation about how people are doing, how they are feeling. It's also, if we think about leadership today, we have to make 100% of all the decisions based on maybe 30% with 30% of information. And that means that, you know, we are collecting data all the time. We are checking in with different people in terms of what might be the right decision. But new information is coming in as well all the time. And that means that we make decisions and we don't necessarily how they will play out. It also means that we might make a decision today, and maybe in a week from now or a month from now, we have to reverse the decision and make a different decision. And therefore, as leaders, it's important to be vulnerable, be honest about it, and share with our colleagues that, you know, we do as much as we can based on what we know, and we need to see how things go actually. So being open and vulnerable. In times of this, where a lot of things are changing, it's also key that we almost feel that we are over communicating. A lot is happening in our organizations, and therefore, and people don't know necessarily what's happening, and there might be rumors about different things, and therefore to communicate, to give clarity, but also acknowledge that you might not have the answer, you might not know what has been decided, and that's perfectly fine as long as we communicate. And last but not least, as leaders, it's also important to stay calm. It's basically the ability of being, to take ourselves away from an emotionally charged situation, and in order to start thinking more clearly about what's going on here. So it's all about, back to emotional intelligence. How can we regulate our emotions in the work that we are doing? And then, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is also a time where a lot of things are changing. And from a mindset perspective, it's key to think about our own development and our own personal growth. And there are a couple of reasons for it. One is that it's expected that a number of jobs will go away. And if we or other people we know are in roles that will not come back anymore, obviously we need to upskill and reskill ourselves. But also it's exciting that a lot of us are working on tasks, are working with technology that we have never used before. And you see on this visual the comfort zone and the learning zone. And if we start doing things that we have never done before, this basically, it will push us in our learning zone. And that's wonderful. Also, I've been in touch with a number of chief learning officers, executives and leadership development globally. And we plan to publish a report over the next 2 weeks. And leaders indicate that they have made helping people to work virtually a top priority, including helping people with their personal health and well-being. And Noémie will talk about it over the next couple of minutes. And last but not least, also to help leadership to be successful in times of turbulence. So all of that, I think it's important that we develop a growth mindset. Carol Dweck, a professor in the United States, have done a lot of work on this topic, a fantastic book on mindsets, where we need to have a growth mindset. And a growth mindset is a mindset where we tell ourselves that, our talent is unknown. We can continue, learn and grow throughout our lives. And we have a tremendous opportunity to continue upskill, reskill ourselves. So a growth mindset is an important mindset at times that we are now. And my advice to everybody is make sure that you reflect on your own development and think about what you can do to continue update your skill sets, because significant change is ahead. we need to upskill a lot of people globally. So turn it back to you, Noémie.
Thank you, Nick. Just a reminder to mute yourself also so that the clarity is clear. Yeah. Thank you. Beautiful. All right. So if we were doing a leadership development program for you guys right now on positive leadership and mindsets, we would focus in on building resilience. So in the question box, would you guys maybe enter any thoughts you have on resilience? What is resilience? Maybe a time when you felt most resilient. And we'll also get to some of your questions. Hi, everyone. Hi, Otto. Beautiful. So there are a couple of definitions on resilience. A lot of it involves bouncing back in the face of adversity, how elastic we can be, and how we can build our capacity to not only endure, but recover. And so that's been one of the major insights in the field of resilience. And the big misconception is that resilience is about pure grit, pushing through situations, and then that makes you a resilient person. But we know that resilience is a skill and a capacity that we can build. And the way that we build resilience is actually by building time into our lives to recover after this kind of situation that may have been a hardship or adversity. And we're all building resilience right now. So this picture here is of a desert rose. So you can see it's a dry, barren environment. And again, the question is always, why is it that some plants and some people, some organizations are growing through adversity and hardship, and others struggle? And so a key component of this is vitality. So how much energy do we have? How well are we taking care of ourselves? And we'll speak about a couple of different components, but I'd like to ask you guys a couple of questions for the chat box in the question area. I see some comments: staying calm, being positive, adapting. Yeah, so these are great definitions. So I'd like you guys to answer these questions. On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the greatest, 3 being neutral, I'd love you guys to either reflect on your own sheet of paper or in the question box. Where are you in terms of negative emotions? So 5 being, my negative emotions are quite high right now. Or 1, they're pretty low. Feel free to just chime in. And then we'll move to stress. Excuse me. So how high is your stress? So this is a subjective question. How are you feeling about your stress levels? 5 being really high, 1 being low, 3 somewhere in the middle. And then assessing our sleep. 5 is amazing sleep. 4, pretty good. Same scale. And then finally, positive emotions. So getting a quick sense of how am I doing in this positivity ratio? How much stress do I feel like I'm under? And how's my sleep doing? 4. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, so I see some variations, some areas for growth. So this is a vitality model that I developed with Nick, and we have looked at different components of flourishing, so of health, well-being, and happiness. And a lot of the models on well-being have been amazing in advancing our understanding in terms of the research and helping guide a lot of practice on different dimensions like meaning, the power of relationships and engagement, a sense of accomplishment or self-efficacy, how much you believe that you can accomplish the goals you set for yourselves. And a lot of these models have failed to include the body and the environment. And we know when we talk about resilience that regeneration is key to look at our bodies. Are we taking care of them? How's our sleep, our energy, our nutrition, our movement, right? And this reinforces all of the different dimensions. So looking at mindfulness and self-regulation, our ability to master our own emotions and build resilience are all affected by the body, as well as learning and growth. And so you'll see these pieces support one another. Having a strong sense of purpose and meaning is also protective, for example, for burnout. And we know that the #1 predictor of longevity is high quality relationships. But we do not live in a vacuum, right? And so just like we have a relational environment around us, we also have a work environment. And we're all experiencing a very radical change in our work environments and perhaps people in our work environments. So the social element has changed, or how we're able to relate to one another if we're working from a distance, right? So it's not necessarily conventional remote work because we don't necessarily have a choice of where we are. But these are important questions. And then, of course, our relationship to the natural environment and macro level forces are really key to our well-being, our health, and our happiness, as well as the energy we have for our careers. So some of our research on job vitality will lead you through a couple of these basic questions. So this survey was led with 3,000 leaders on health, well-being, and happiness, and we'll just cover a few. So I'd love you guys to get your paper out or enter into the chat box, yes or no. #1, for the physical dimension, I participate in physical activities at least 30 minutes a day. #2, I am getting enough sleep every day. And this varies person to person, but about 7.5 to 9 hours for most people. Nutrition, so subjectively, I believe my perception is that I'm eating pretty healthy foods. I'm practicing mindfulness several times a week. Sense of purpose, my work or my life, different things that I do give me a sense of purpose and meaning. I'm motivated to pursue knowledge for personal or professional reasons. And then some components of well-being. I've been feeling a sense of relaxation. My life is well balanced. And finally, my work contributes to my psychological well-being. So just take a moment there. Another assessment. So if you look at the sample of the 3,000 plus leaders, and this was pre-COVID, so it'll be interesting to see how things shift. What we found is that only 52% of people are engaging in physical activity 30 minutes a day. 47% are getting enough sleep. 59% are eating healthy foods. 32% only are practicing mindfulness a couple of times a week in its different forms. 69% of people feel that their work has strong purpose and meaning. So our highest number so far. Learning, about half and half. Half are motivated to pursue knowledge for personal and professional reasons. Well-being, pretty low here, like mindfulness in terms of relaxation. A sense of balance, 58%. And well-being, 43% psychologically. So if you look at these numbers, there's a variation. About 4 of these dimensions need a lot of growth. But even the higher numbers, like purpose, you can see aren't necessarily balanced by the other physical dimensions that we need to recharge and be at our best and most vital. So there's a tremendous area of growth. Now, if this was pre-COVID, you can imagine this might be a little bit different now. So worth reflecting. But, I take a moment now and just tune in and ask, how are you guys doing compared to these numbers? Let's see some questions. And this was a global survey, yes. And we're going to open it up for some dialogue very soon. But I'm going to hand it back over to Nick to do a recap for us. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Noémie. So if we reflect on, positive leadership practices and mindsets, the question is, okay, from a business perspective, does it matter, right? So there's of course an individual component, how we are feeling, how we are doing, but also from an organization perspective, will this have an impact on the organization? So some facts on this. So overall, people are more productive. People are happy and positive. They are more likely, when you think about career from a career perspective, are more likely to receive a promotion. There's significant less health-related issues and stress. Creativity is a very important competence. If we reflect on, what's ahead of us, many organizations need to reinvent themselves, need to think about different business models, and therefore people with ideas, people are creative is very key. Our brain works better if we feel good. From what we know about trust, people who work in organizations where there's a high level of trust among each other, they have less stress, significant less stress, and probably if you think about a moment that you had an interaction with a person in your organization or outside of your organization, somebody you did not trust, had a huge impact on stress and on your energy, but also on productivity, actually. The pointer is not doing what it needs to do, and there are less sick days as well if people are working in trusted companies. So, and finally, more engaged, and they are more satisfied with what they are doing. So, and last but not least, less burnout. So a huge impact if we think about the impact of positive leadership practices. Now, finally, and then we will go to the Q&A. As Noémie mentioned at the beginning, both of us are co-facilitating a fantastic program. It's an executive master in positive leadership and transformation. This program will start this summer virtually in July. And there are 4 blocks that people come together. So it's a program that professionals, leaders can do while they are working. The first block will focus on health and well-being. The second on human leadership capabilities, as we discussed a little bit. Then leading positive change and leading organizational transformation and developing teams. And this program is based on insights from positive psychology and the neurosciences. It's a blended program. It's a flipped classroom. And the first module is in September in Iceland, where we will be in nature with a group of participants. So we still have a few slots open for this program. So if you consider this, check out the website from IE, and that will get us to the last slide. Feel free to connect with us over LinkedIn, and then I will hand it back to my colleague Loic to look at some of the questions that you have in the question box, and I will turn on my camera again. I got a message. It was a little bit choppy reception, so hopefully it will be fine now.
Thank you very much for that. It was very, very interesting. So yes, please do send in your questions, or we will answer them now. Actually, I have a first question that's for you, Nick. So you mentioned the reflection in action. So the question is, what are your suggestions for stimulating the necessary in reflection and action for managers and for employees?
Yeah, so if we think about reflection, and Noémie shared the notion of being on the balcony and in the dance. And if we reflect on our day-to-day activities, we are in the dance to a large extent. But in order to really think clear and make the right decisions, we need to detach ourselves from the dance and be on the balcony. And what it means actually is that we need to take time to reflect, to think things through, and ideally we do that with someone else. And that could be a trusted colleague, it could be a mentor. And I had an opportunity in my career to work with many mentors actually that I engaged when it comes to reflecting on different things, or family members, right? So, but doing this with other people will help us tremendously to go through a thinking process. It's always very hard for ourselves to ask questions and try to answer them. Doing this with somebody else is very powerful, and this applies for leaders and it applies for employees.
Nick, I'd love to chime in on that question for a moment. I would say also, depending on if you're an introvert or an extrovert and how you process information, some people might prefer to spend some time by themselves first, reflecting before they connect with another person, which is of course tremendously valuable because you're getting feedback. And practicing contemplative practices like mindfulness can help optimize our neuroscience, so to speak, so that we can actually integrate the information, so that we're in a better place to do that reflection and then to learn any insights. So whether you exercise or you do some mindfulness, something that grounds you physiologically would be really helpful to sort of absorb the learning from a neurological perspective.
Thank you very much for that. Next question. How can I positively lead a team? What are the right behaviors to have?
More than happy to start with this again. So a lot has to do with context, right? So in terms of, if you reflect on the team that you are leading in the context of your organization, in the context on what's happening in your organization, and also knowing actually each individual in your team very well, I think that's a big start. Understanding what people's individual needs are. I always start with that. I think it's building a strong relationship with each individual and try to understand what people's needs are in their role. And that has to do with attention, has to do with information, has to do with recognition. We don't necessarily always recognize people enough for what we are doing. And I think particularly in times like this, it's easy to cut corners and just assume that people are on the payroll that, they don't need recognition. So recognition is important. Checking in with people is important. And the last thing I like to share is, goes back to a positive leader and leadership and optimism and being hopeful. As I started the webinar, there's always reason to be hopeful and reasons to be optimistic. Things will get better, things will change, and there will be new opportunities for people. And it's important that people who report to a leader who is hopeful and optimistic about the future. Because if that's not the case, it's easy that the culture will shift very, very, very fast. People become critical, cynical, sober, and that's not necessarily how you build a high-performing team. So the bottom line is a lot of personal attention, humanity, honesty, empathy, communication.
Great, thank you. Let me just see if there's where is the research in this area going? Is there any new wow being discovered?
I'll chime in here. Well, yeah. We know when you say this area, do you mean positive leadership specifically or a particular domain within positive leadership?
The question is not really precise, but I would say in positive leadership, yes.
Yeah, so there's really great work across institutions coming out of the Yale School of Management. The real center and hub is the University of Michigan. There's a Center for Positive Organizational Scholarship and Positive Business. So a lot of work being done, as well as Adam Grant, who's at UPenn. So there are a lot of different researchers coming out of these hubs and a lot of practitioners who are harnessing this kind of work. So I would say, yeah, and in terms of where it's going, I think in many different directions, the work keeps building. But I would say a large focus I've seen has been on the impact of positive connections and relationships and how to be more humane with one another. Even right now in the pandemic during layoffs, You know, how do you do that? How do you communicate with people? How do you care about them? And particularly around compassion science. So how do you incorporate compassion for people in organizations and how that actually links to outcomes as well? And I see another great question along those lines, Loic, I'd just like to address. Someone mentioned, sure. Desiree is asking, should the 5-to-1 ratio of, and that ratio is about negative to positive thoughts, be applied when you're giving feedback? And there's been a lot of work around this. Like 360s are often a great source of feedback, but they can also be demoralizing emotionally in terms of energy. And so there have been new assessment scales like the Shift 360 and other models like from the Institute for Neuroleadership, for example, where you're looking at buffering that with a lot more positive feedback and then feedback around learning and growth. So the framing really does matter. It's an excellent question.
Conscious of time, maybe we can answer 1 or 2 more questions. Have one here is how this situation will impact leadership in the future. Obviously, we're talking about remote working, new working models. So how will it impact leadership?
I think that you know, it will be expected a number of shifts, right? So a shift will be more people will work from home. Another shift is that organizations will start working even more agile and nimble. So we get rid of all the silos. So that's kind of a big shift. Another change is that it's anticipated that organizations will take a look at their supply chain and identify kind of, you know, areas of high risk, and they might change actually where certain goods and services are produced. There will be impact on you know, kind of, you know, how we are working actually because of the changes, and roles will change, etc. So I would say a lot, and it means that leaders need to develop new competencies themselves to stay on top of what's happening in their organizations, and they also need to make sure that they continue to develop the people around them, because a lot of learning needs to take place on the day-to-day basis, and the key theme is always how can we turn the workplace into a learning place and developing people around us.
Great, thank you for that. So maybe one last question. So how to convert potential teams to a productive team, and how to deal with staff that are reluctant to change?
I think this relates to another question that was asked earlier in the chat box, which is how do you navigate your own worry, anxiety, and potentially negative emotions while you're dealing with a team and trying to practice positive leadership? And so there's an element of authenticity here, and being sort of tuned in and self-aware to your own emotional state, working with your own kind of energy in a present, mindful way, and dialoguing with people and shifting that. And so again, positive psychology and positive leadership is not about denying the actual negative realities or challenges, but it's about coming together and seeing how you can harness it. So how do you deal with negativity on a team? I would say, first of all, taking care of yourself, because it impacts how you show up. And then second of all, when you're dealing with people, is starting with caring about them as people, and then slowly shifting that energy through the positive practices that Nick mentioned in his chart. And certainly much more to be said on this topic. We hope to come back and do some more sessions for you guys, or we're always happy to continue dialogue or you know, do some programs in the future. So any other thoughts, Nick? I know it's 12:00.
I want to thank everybody for your time today, for dialing in. I hope that there are a couple of takeaways from this session. Key is, you know, stay healthy, take care of yourself and people around you. You know, important to stay optimistic and positive, you know, hopeful. There are many reasons to do so. Wish you all the best. Hope to stay in touch. And again, with Noémie and I, you can connect with us over LinkedIn. And thanks, Loic, for organizing the event today, enable this to make this happen for, we had close to 190 people in the session today. So thank you for that.
No, thank you very much. It was great. Thank you very much for joining. I think it was very interesting, and I hope actually those participants actually got a takeaway. So we'll be sending the recording of the webinar. It will be actually in your inbox in the next hour. So Noémie and Nick, thank you very much for joining today. Hopefully we'll get to see you again on the next webinar. To all of you that joined today, thank you very much. Please be safe, and hopefully to the next webinar. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Loic.
Bye.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you all participants.
Thank you.